if a person just decides to stay home with a caregiver and they don't socialize, they're really going to deteriorate mentally,
They will,
emotionally,
yeah.
and physically. So
Mhm.
when you come into an environment like ours, where you're around people, whether it's at a meal, an exercise class, a discussion about a book, or you're watching a movie together, or you're having a political debate together, no matter which side of the fence you're on,
Right.
it stimulates your brain and it gets your juices flowing, and it just makes you feel more alive.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
As human beings, need that kind of contact.
Welcome to the Answers for Elders radio show.
And welcome back, everyone, to Answers for Elders Radio Network. And we are here again with Leon Grundstein, the founder and CEO of GenCare Lifestyle in the greater Puget Sound area, from Tacoma all the way up to Granite Falls in Snohomish County. 6 locations to absolutely revolutionize senior living. And I think that's the thing that's so exciting about what GenCare does and how you guys just have totally set the benchmark for everything. And Danielle Parker, who is the COO and oversees, I guess, the healthcare aspect of the organization and the operations, which is a huge job, by the way. Danielle, I can imagine you're very busy. So welcome back to both of you.
Thank you.
You know, Leon, I want to talk. We had just finished the last segment talking about the whole diet nutrition piece, but I want to really talk about just this longevity factor. How does that really affect, length of life?
Well, that's a very good question, because we tracked that. We initially started the program, we were averaging maybe 26 months on the average length of stay for our residents.
Wow.
And once we started implementing the program, that increased from a range to about 32 to 36 months on average. So
Wow.
we know it had an impact on our longevity, and it improved the quality of life of the individuals as they lived in our buildings. So we think that whole programmatic, the 4 facets, really all go hand in glove, not just with the food, but they're all tied together. And they all complement each other. So we do focus on the food because seems like we're the army that travels on our stomach. So we always have to address the food first. And that's the thing people notice immediately: the quality of the food, the flavor of the food. And then we add the subtleties of whether it's good for, inflammation, manage inflammation, diabetes, celiacs. We can adjust for all those things.
Yeah.
And we prepare probably 97% of our food on site. We don't like preservatives or pre-made food at all, because all those chemicals
they're not good.
They're not good for you.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because we just went through a pandemic not too long ago, and so many seniors were isolated and they didn't eat right. And we're still measuring the effects from that, of the isolation, but also they weren't eating right because they weren't going to the grocery store. What they were doing is eating, something fast, or they really should have had higher degree of care. And so they were making do in the kitchen. And I think one of the things that you guys really help is to, the quality of life is so much better. You integrate health and wellness into everyday life, but the socialization piece, especially after so many of our seniors were isolated for so long, how does that make a difference?
Well, it's clear that, and the example is, one of the worst things that can happen to you is being solitary confinement. That's why it's so oppressive.
Yeah.
And that speaks to why, if a person just decides to stay home with a caregiver and they don't socialize, they're really going to deteriorate mentally, emotionally, and physically. So when you come into an environment like ours, where you're around people, whether it's at a meal, an exercise class, a discussion about a book, or you're watching a movie together, or you're having a political debate together, no matter which side of the fence you're on, it stimulates your brain and it gets your juices flowing, and it just makes you feel more alive.
Yeah.
As human beings, need that kind of contact,
Yeah.
and you get a few hugs along the way, and physical touch is important too. Not just the verbal interaction, the visual interaction. So we encourage all that and develop relationships and bonds, and people are happier and they live longer when they're in that type of situation.
Absolutely. So Danielle, do you have any stories? You probably have had a million stories of families that have been, that there have been success stories of senior
Yeah,
residents.
absolutely. So I met actually a daughter of a current resident now. He was a prospective resident then, and she was looking for senior housing communities specifically related to nutrition. Dad was home alone, independent, still driving, and he was eating a lot of frozen TV dinners,
Yeah.
which we know is number one ingredient is sodium. They're just full of sodium for that shelf life. And he had heart failure, and his legs were swelling, and he couldn't figure out why, and it was affecting, having a very negative impact on his quality of life and his ability to navigate at home. But navigating the kitchen, he was by himself, and like Leon says, eating in mealtime is such a social, tradition. Breaking
It is.
kind of since the dawn of time, a tradition of ours. And if no one was there, he didn't think he needed to cook a fancy meal or have a starch and a protein and a vegetable with every meal. And the TV dinner was fine. About 6 weeks after he moved in, the swelling in his legs was nearly gone. And
Isn't that amazing?
he was walking better. He was participating in activities. He was coming to the apartment. He actually said he hated TV dinners.
Isn't that
but they were convenient. He said they had their time and place, but they weren't for him anymore.
Yeah.
And his daughter just felt so relieved that it was her dad back. Her dad was back, and he would opt to go with her, out on outings and go to the grocery store and run errands, and do things that he wasn't doing or he was declining to do. And it was because his mobility was really suffering from how swollen his legs were.
Yeah.
And that salt has a direct impact on the heart, and you want to reduce it as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Danielle, that is in itself something that when you think about quality of life, I know that just what you put in your mouth, there's a lot of times we're sitting there by ourselves, we tend to overeat because again, there's not that social interaction. We don't give ourselves the time to slow down a little bit so that we wolf food down before our body realizes that we're not hungry anymore. We don't need any more food. So
Absolutely.
Overweight can happen. That can have stress on bones, joints, all kinds of, overwhelming things like that. When people are carrying around excess weight, it'll affect arthritis hugely. I know that so many times, our seniors, they don't realize, that their everyday actions can make a difference in their quality of life. And to have that social activity of mealtime is amazing.
Absolutely. 3 of our communities have memory care, and exactly that. If a resident has lost interest in eating, that social aspect, it will trigger and stimulate appetite that maybe there wasn't a desire there the day before, or the interest wasn't quite there. And just that social aspect of being together with friends and familiar faces, it will stimulate that, that
Absolutely.
appetite. Yeah,
Absolutely. And so we're going to be right back right after this. In the meantime, you can reach out to GenCare at www.gencarelifestyle.com. Did you know that you can discover hundreds of podcasts in our library on senior care? So visit our website and discover our decision guides that will help you also navigate decision making. Find us at answersforelders.com.